Everybody around me was struggling, and
wealth belongs to us as well.
a lot of us are walking around with money trauma.
Welcome to the Latin Wealth Podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating the Latino community about entrepreneurship, investing, and business.
Yo, what's going on, Latin Wealth family? Welcome to another episode to the Latin Wealth Podcast. Very excited about today's conversation because we got another new person on the platform, new interview, and it's going to be a phenomenal conversation. Just a couple hints at what we're going to be speaking about. First off, 2025 is right around the corner. If you're listening to this, you're probably in 2025 already or just a couple weeks away. We're going to talk about how to set yourself up successfully going into next year. And we're also going to be talking about a 6-step process to become your family's first millionaire. All right. So look, you don't want to miss this one. Share this episode with someone that needs to hear these topics and this information. And we're going to get into a little bit about our guest today. A little bit about our guest. She is an award-winning financial advisor, educator, public speaker. Her content and coaching program has helped hundreds of women grow wealth, make impactful investments, and develop a strong mindset to live life on their own terms, which you guys know that we love that mindset. She's also been named one of the country's top influential financial advisors. And look, she's been featured in some major publications such as Telemundo, CNBC, New York Times, Vice News, and a bunch of other places as well. Welcome to the podcast, Ana Nije Conte. Did I get that right?
You're close. We don't work on it, but you're good. Listen, I know my last name scares everybody. I got you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I appreciate you being here. I said it before we hit record, and I sincerely mean it. Thank you, Ana, for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm super excited about our conversation.
Absolutely. So before we get too deep into it and deep in the weeds, look, I know you have 2 kids, correct? You're married.
3. I got 3
kids. Mm-hmm. Okay, 3 kids, married. You're originally from New York. You're a foodie. I know you guys love to travel. What does outside of work, what does a day look like with your family? A free day. What do you guys do for a free day? What's a fun day for you guys and the kids?
Yeah, listen.
You're in DC now. What does that look like?
Yeah, so that's a couple things. I think, I'm always in the gym. So non-negotiable for me, I'm gonna hit the gym early. Yeah. I'm gonna usually do that before the kids are up, make them some breakfast. If it's a Saturday, day free, make them some pancakes or something delicious. Yeah. Usually my kids love to go. There's a trail really close to our park, so we'll usually hit that, maybe take them to the playground that's at the trail, or go hit a museum. And then usually I'm, cooking and we're having a movie night at home. That's pretty typical.
That's awesome. And look, I know you be up early because sometimes I'm up early too, and I'm looking at who see my story, Ana.
Yeah.
The first one.
Listen,
she up too.
Listen, one of the most humbling things in the world is having tweens and teens. So my oldest daughter is 11. And just this morning, so speaking of getting up early, she was like, I don't understand you. She walked into my office, it was 6 and I was already working. And she's like, you're up so early and you just do you just open your eyes and say, let me open my laptop? That's the first thing I need to do. No, I pray, I meditate, right. I drink my coffee, I do that, but then I'm gonna get after it.
100%. It's funny about me, when I open my eyes, if I'm gonna be up that early, I have to do something active. I have to get my body moving. If I just sit down and pray, read my Bible, I'm gonna end up falling asleep.
Yeah,
so let me do something active first, and then when I get back, I do that routine. But that's pretty dope. Yeah, absolutely. But look, talk to me about. I want to know about your background and you growing up. I know you grew up around a family that really embraced and prioritized empathy, kindness, compassion, joy, hard work. These are all words that would fill your childhood. Talk to me about what that looked like in your household and who you grew up around.
Yeah, I will say I grew up I feel so fortunate about the way I grew up. You know, I didn't have like material wealth. You know, mommy worked 2 or 3 jobs when I was growing up. And so it was not like there was a lot to go around, but I grew up with my grandmother. So just to back up, right, I'm half Puerto Rican, half African. Both my parents came to the U.S. And, you know, for me, I grew up mostly with mommy's side of the family, which is the Puerto Rican side of the family. And I grew up with my grandmother. Like I didn't go to daycare. Grandma took care of me. She lived with my aunt and uncle, so I was around them all the time, like my mom's older sister, my cousins all lived there. Like there was just a lot of us living together. And I was there all the time. And, you know, the things that I really saw modeled by them is like hard work, being very kind, like being very honest. And there was just always a lot of love and happiness around, right? It was, you know, I would wake up in the morning and my uncle was always cooking. There was salsa music playing. You know, my grandmother usually was just like spoiling me and being super sweet to me the way she was. Like, I feel so fortunate that I grew up in that environment. But, you know, I didn't grow up with wealth. And so there was a lot of, I didn't go without to say, like, it's not like I ever worried about food or ever worried about anything because I had this big extended family that was all together. But the thing that was a struggle for me was everybody around me was struggling. And that's probably why there were so many of us living in a house together, right? But there was a lot of narratives around money and struggle with money and struggle to get ahead financially with everybody that was around me that, you know, it was a big concern for me. And it's ironic, I think, that I work in the field that I do now, given that kind of background that I grew up with.
You know, it's interesting. You know, I've asked a lot of people this question, you know, what does wealth look like to you? What does wealth mean to you? And a lot of people, they share that same story of like, yo, wealth is being with my family, being happy, you know, being able to wake up in the morning and like have that freedom and that flexibility. I don't hear too many people saying wealth is like money to them. It's more about like the freedom. It's about the time they spend with their family. So it's interesting. I could definitely relate to you growing up. We got at least half of it, right? One side is a wealth. Now it's time to focus on the other side, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like, listen, I think that money is just the path that we need to get to there, right? Like I think Latinos as a community, we're so resilient, and we are a people that will like make $1 out of 15 cents. Like, we will stretch $1. We will find a way to be happy. We will find a way to celebrate and bring joy in whatever scenario that we have going on. So, like, I think that just moves within us. That's how we're going to be. But I also think that there's a whole other bit that we don't necessarily get because we typically are not very wealthy, which is having the ability to say, I'm going to do whatever I want, right? Like, not having to, my mom got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but that's because she had to be at work and she had to commute and do all that. I get up because that's a ritual that I have for me, right? Like, it's a different energy with which you can approach life. And I also think, you know, I think wealth to me is to have the money to buy the lifestyle that I want. And that's not about material. That's about like the standard of living that I want. And also to have the impact that I want and to live a fully realized life, right? Like, I don't know about you, Chris, but for me, you know, my mom was a teen mom, you know, victim of domestic violence, like, but she's like a fighter. Like, mommy was a fighter, and mommy was going to get ahead first in her family to go to college, even get to past high school, to be honest. And she was going to make it happen. But the thing is, she always lived with so many regrets and so many things like, oh, I wish I could have done that. Oh, if I had only had this, I would have done that. And I witnessed that, and I saw like this beautiful person with a beautiful heart, like, not be able to live a life that she wanted. And me being this stubborn person that I am, I was like, that's not going to be me. What it won't be is me. And I think that's the biggest gift that wealth and financial stability, financial abundance has given me, is that I have so many choices.
100%. So when did you start to realize those conversations? When did you start to have those conversations with your mom, and you realize like, this isn't how I want to live? What age were you? And what was like the next step, right? To make sure like, okay, I want to do something different.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I was just saying this to my husband. Like, I remember probably being around 7. I was like, this is not going to be me. Like, it can't be me. It won't be me counting change in the car to see if I can put gas in the car. Like, it's not going to be me, because I had to live with a lot of that stress and that uncertainty. You know, I also had like a lot of really impactful situations going around me with my family, like my close family. And that also showed me like, I'm not going to be dependent on a man to have a quality of life that I want. And so for me, it was very early. And to be honest, I didn't grow up in an environment where anybody had money to invest. So it wasn't like I knew this was a career. It wasn't like I woke up and was like, I'm going to be a financial advisor. Like, that was so far removed from my mind. I didn't even know that was a career path. I really just was committed to doing really well in school, getting into a good college, getting a good degree, and then at some point, you know, getting into real estate investing or getting into entrepreneurship as a path to freedom. What ended up happening for me was I graduated school in the Great Recession, and there were not a lot of jobs. There were not.
You graduated high school
in 2008, college in 2008.
Okay.
And so there was not a lot of jobs there, right? And so I was like, I'm going to find what I can. I ended up getting a job with a wealth management firm. They needed an assistant. And I took that, and it's history ever since.
I love that. So when you got that job at the wealth management firm, you never been around wealth, probably up until this point, didn't hear some of the conversations. There's words and there's jargon that's being thrown around. You probably don't know what's being spoken about. What was some of the first lessons that you learned being in that environment, and how did you apply it to your own life?
Yeah. So the first lesson, I think, and this sounds so silly, I think, but you know, when you grow up around struggle, you think like rich people feel so far removed. And in my mind, rich people equated to famous people, right? Like I was like, they're football players, they're basketball players. It's Mark Anthony, right? It's not anybody who's just wealthy because they're wealthy. So, you know, one of my jobs was to answer the phone. So the process they taught us, and this is like the most impactful memory I have from this place. The process they taught us is you look at the caller ID on the phone, you see the name, you pull up the client's name in the CRM system, and then you can have that baseline information while you're talking to them so you're not fumbling around, because these are very wealthy people. Like, they want you to treat them extremely well. So I see this name pop up. I pull up the man's name in the CRM system, and it says $200 million. And my brain like short-circuited for a very long time, right? Like my brain was like, there's the decimal place is in the wrong spot. You know what I'm saying?
Something wrong about this.
Yeah, like there's too many zeros. Like, I don't understand. This system is broken, right? But the thing that was the most crazy to me is after I hung up the phone, I passed the call to the financial advisor, right? I start Googling this man. I'm Googling his address. Nothing comes up. And so this is just a dude with $200 million in a portfolio, not to mention all the other stuff he has, businesses and real estate and stuff. And that blew my mind, because I recognized that it wasn't all just I have to be somebody on stage to be really wealthy. It was like there's millions and millions of wealthy people, just ridiculously wealthy out here. The other thing I would say is I came across, you know, that was really extreme, but I came across so many people that, you know, they had $3, $5, $7 million in a portfolio, and they were just regular, let's call it federal government employees that maxed out their 401k every year, them and their spouse, every year, their entire career. And now they're 65 or 70, and they've got millions of dollars in there. And I was like, that in and of itself is crazy, because you know, while at the time, I think it was like 17K a year that like was the max, maybe it was 15, I don't really remember, but that's a lot of money, but it wasn't so much money. And it really showed me that, like, if you play the long game and if you're diligent and consistent, even if you don't do anything crazy, you don't have to invent something crazy. You don't have to start some big business. You could just do that and you'll still be better off than like 90% of the people in this country. And that changed my trajectory. So like I went immediately to I'm going to max out this 401k. I'm going to try and fund my Roth IRA. I'm going to pay down my student loan so that I can invest more. I'm going to be really diligent about my, maintaining my overhead in terms of my lifestyle for a while so that I can build that wealth. And what that ultimately has done for me is it allowed me to make the leap into entrepreneurship 5 years ago because I had already done so much of this groundwork in my personal life that it gave me the bandwidth to say, I'm going to take a bet on myself and do this thing. And it's paid off so beautifully for me.
No, that's amazing. And I want to go back to what you said about when you think about wealthy people, rich people, you thought of athletes, you thought of football players, you thought of like Mark Anthony and artists and whatnot. One of my partners and I was having a conversation just a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about like, if you ask a Latino or if you ask somebody, name me 3 successful Latino entrepreneurs or people in finances, we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But if you say, name me 3 artists or baseball players or something like that, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And so on the flip side, name me 3 white CEOs or white successful people, and Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, we can name all these people, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and like he asked me that question, I was kind of stuck. I was like, I don't even know 3, to be honest. I got to really think about it. But it's interesting. I say that to say, like, growing up, that was the same situation for me. I see successful people, basketball players. That's what I want to be like. I want to be wealthy. I want to be able to take care of my mom. This is a route for me to do it.
Yeah.
Playing basketball. That's all I seen. That's what we see as people of color and Latinos.
100%. And the problem is not everybody has MBA level skills, right? Not everybody has that. You may have other skills that can get you there, or you may not even be all that skilled or career driven. But once again, you do the boring stuff consistently long enough, you're going to get there. It's real, but we have to see that in order to recognize that we can be that. And for me, that was the eye opener for me. It was the exposure to all of these wealthy people who were completely unremarkable, by the way. Like, they were not brilliant. A lot of them were not very nice people. Like, they were not attractive. There was nothing remarkable about these people. They just found a career that was high paying. And like, this kind of segues a little bit into what I know we wanted to talk about today, but like, they found high value skills, high income careers. They built businesses. They saved and invested diligently. They took bets on themselves. They took bets on the market. They took bets on real estate, and they did that consistently. And then they have like life-changing, game-changing wealth for themselves and their future generations. And that's such a gift that I want to see more Latinos do, because I know how hard we work. I know how smart we are. Like, we have all of these amazing qualities, and there's no reason why we should be as far behind as we are, especially those of us who have the privilege of like being born and raised here. Like, we have all the tools, and there's so many of us now that like, even if we just support each other, we're going to get so much further ahead.
I love that. And you said doing the boring stuff consistently. And I think that's an issue. We like to do the sexy things. We want to do the things that are like, that look good. We don't really want to worry about maxing out our 401k, and that stuff is boring. So it takes to flip our mindset and our perspective on these things to show like, the people that are doing that boring stuff, this is what their portfolio is looking like. This is what their life is looking like. So I want to break down a 6, I know when you talked about it, was a 6-step process. It's 5, 6, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Some practical steps that we can help and give people out there, our community, to get them on their path to become their family's first millionaire.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first I will say is a lot of us are walking around with money trauma. Like, we're walking around, even if it's not, and somebody said to me, a friend of mine who's a financial coach, she said, most people are just one, especially Latinos, are just one generation removed from poverty, right? So even if you didn't, and this was my case, I didn't grow up in poverty, but all of that messaging and all of that trauma that my parents, my grandparents, the older people around me experienced, like, that left a mark on me, and it had me operating in ways that didn't really serve me, right? A lot of the experiences I had growing up were not serving me, or I took the meaning of those experiences to be something that was not going to be constructive for me in terms of my financial habits and my financial wellness long term. And so the first thing we have to do is examine, like, what are the thoughts that we have around money? And one of the exercises, you know, just to give kind of a little bit of a concrete tool for people is, you know, if you sit down and journal and think about what are all of those money memories you have from an early age. So your first money memory up until, you know, you call it young adulthood, your early to mid 20s. Think about all of those and then look at those and look at what the lessons that you took away from those were and how you may be exhibiting behaviors now financially that are tied to that. So as an example, right? I have a client of mine who grew up with, you know, she grew up really rough financially. And she had this problem with overspending on her children, right? Because she wanted to overcompensate for her lack that she had growing up. And so she was spending like thousands and thousands of dollars a month on her kids for clothes, for activities, taking them to Disneyland, putting them in competitive ice skating, all of these different things. And the problem she was operating off of a subconscious kind of reaction to that experience, that traumatic experience that she had growing up, where she never had new clothes. She only ever had one pair of shoes. She was always wearing hand-me-downs, right? Like that was her upbringing. And the problem, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. There's nothing wrong with trips to Disneyland or, you know, competitive ice skating or like having your kid looking cute. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when you're doing it at the expense of your financial wellness and you're doing it unconsciously. Because if you're making the conscious choice, like I talk a lot about intentional spending, you can like nice things. I like nice things. I like lots of nice things, and you will never catch me at a cheap hotel, and God help you if you want to have me eating at a chain restaurant. And I don't say that to be bougie, because I'll eat at the mom and pop spot, but like that's just not what I like. But I know myself, I know what I want, and I create the plan to be able to spend that way because that's what I value. Your values, Chris, are going to be different than mine. But until we face those things and those habits that we may be having that are sabotaging us, and we create systems and like get intentional about it, then we're going to just be operating on autopilot. And a lot of times it's to our detriment.
I'm curious, what did you advise to her? And you kind of mentioned it, being more intentional, be more mindful about what you spend. But that's a mother who she naturally wants to love and to give to her kids. So how did you help her reel it back?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I think that it's really important for moms, and I talk about this as a mom, as a daughter of a mom who she would give me her right arm if I asked her for it, truly. Like she'd be like, where's the knife? You know, that's the kind of mom I have. And I'm so grateful for that love and that energy. But the problem is that when you operate in that energy, that also has a negative impact on those kids. Right? And so the thing I told her was like, listen, you make a great income. You make a great, phenomenal, top 5% in the country income. But the problem is that you are not saving and investing to get yourself to a financial independence point. And so are you going to feel good in 30 years when you have to be like, hey, I have a paid off house, but maybe I don't have much of a portfolio. So can I come live with you? You don't want that, right? Like, and you don't want that baby that you love so much and you want to give so much to be worried about you. And how many of us in our community spend all our time worrying about our parents' financial situation? A lot. I'm one of them, right? Like it's just the reality what so many of us have, and that in and of itself is a gift. The other thing I'll say, like free game, I tell my clients to create boundaries around things that they may struggle with spending. So as an example, like set up different accounts that say, hey, this is my spending on the kids account. This is my eating out account. This is my shopping account. And I'm going to fund that with a predetermined amount of money, put that in a separate bank account. And once that money goes away, it's gone. And once you have that mindfulness of having those boundaries and that separation, that goes a long way also into shifting that behavior.
I love that. Okay. So the fear, that was one of the questions I had, the fear around investing in money, and just dealing with the traumas with money and your relationship with money is really the first step that people really, probably one of the most important steps, because without that, it's going to be hard to do the rest of the steps.
For sure. And I'll say, like, even on the flip side, if spending too much is not your problem, some people have a problem of like they want to save everything and they're too conservative. I see this a lot too, where I literally had clients come to me and they're like, I have $500,000 in my bank account. And I know I shouldn't be doing that. Like, I know I'm smart enough to know I should be doing something else, but I'm so fearful of making a mistake or losing the money that I can't bring myself to take that step forward. Like, I need your help in doing that, right? So like, and once again, that's all from some sort of experience they had, some kind of trauma they had, scarcity thing that has led them to be so anxious about making a mistake that they're doing things that just are not good for them and their financial health long term.
Yeah, those type of people, they just love to see that number in their bank account. They just love to look at it. $500,000, we good.
Chris, try and be the person who's trying to rip that away from them. They start crying.
Right,
like,
all that.
They start gripping the table. Like, what do you mean you're going to take that money? You know what I mean? Because that's their safety net. But
that's a safety net.
Think you have to address those fears. The light that you shine on the fear by addressing it really makes a big difference in terms of shifting it. At least it brings some awareness so that you recognize why you're doing that.
So you said something pretty interesting, and then we'll jump into step 2 in a second. You said the word safety net. The money is their safety net. The $500,000 is their safety net. The people that do gain the trust to say, okay, Anna, here you go. You make the decision. Here's the, you can control whatever. Typically, do those people, do they find a new safety net? Do they find that somewhere else? Do you help them?
Yeah.
Have you thought about that, or does it just go away? Like, that's something I'm curious about.
It doesn't go away, but I think a lot of that fear is because they don't have a sense of the full picture and what their long-term financial health looks like. So my process is, we'll look at your full financial picture, and then I'll project out, like, if you just do what you're doing for however long, like, this is what your picture is going to look like 20, 30 years from now. And I think that if I can, I've always been of the mind, and like what I've seen in practice is when I tell people, okay, you actually don't have to save that much. Like, you actually can save X amount, and that's going to get there. So that's an amount less than what they're doing. Or if we invest this and you do this for 10 years, like, you'll be able to stop working at that point. Or if you put this amount of money into an account for your kids' college, like, then it's going to be fully funded. Like, if I give them those anchor points, that helps a lot in giving them the feeling of safety, because they feel like they have a plan and they have some insight into what the future is going to look like.
You become their safety net.
Yeah. Listen, I don't want to be their safety net. Their skills and their clarity is what's the safety net, right? Like, whether they work with me or whether they work with anybody else, if they know, hey, I have to invest $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year for X amount of years, and then I'm good, then that's like a beautiful thing, because they can just rock with that too.
100%. Okay, so walk us through step 2. What would be the next thing you would advise? So
step 2 is the thing that nobody wants to do, which is, once again, the boring work, is to look at the numbers, right? Like, look at what your spending is, look at what your income is, and then also, look at what assets you have accumulated or what debt you have accumulated, and figure out, like, what's the gap between where you are and where you're trying to go. Right? Like, that's a hard thing for people to do, because a lot of times people don't want to look at ways they may have taken actions or made decisions that didn't serve them well financially. They don't want to look at what their Uber Eats bill is every month, right? Like, they don't want to look at what they're spending on shopping or at Amazon or Target. Like, people don't like to do that, but it is one of the most crucial data points. Like, we say as financial advisors, garbage in terms of the plan and like the numbers, then garbage out. You're not going to get a good sense of where you're headed or what changes you need to make until you actually get a handle on that. So, I tell folks to create a net worth statement and look at historical spending. That's like the biggest, right? So a net worth statement is really just you list all of the things that you own. So bank accounts, savings accounts, cash you have at home, cars, houses, investment accounts, work, 401k at work, whatever it is, list all of that. Then you list all the stuff you owe. So credit cards, personal loans, student loans, mortgages, whatever it is. And then that net number is one of the most important numbers you're ever going to have. Like, true story, when I first did mine, it was like negative $50,000 because I had no money and I had student loans. So like sometimes it's not pretty, right? That's where I started. But having that number and tracking that number over time, I tell folks to do that like on a quarterly basis. Tracking that number over time makes such a big difference, because what it's doing is it's capturing the whatever amount you're putting in your 401k or your employer match. It's capturing your debt pay down and like how much you're reducing the principal, how much you're saving on a monthly basis, like investment gains. All of that is being captured together. And it's so nice to see all of those little pieces that you may feel, especially at the beginning of your journey, that it's not adding up to much, but it does over time. And when you see it all together, it's like, oh, that's a couple $1,000 or that's a couple $100. Like, that's a big difference.
No, it definitely is a big difference. And I love that because it gives people the opportunity to be more mindful about what's being spent. And because most people, let's be honest, like, they're just swiping their credit card, especially during this time of the year, holidays. They're just swiping their credit card. They're just, they're not even worried about what's coming in and out. Some people are scared and they have anxiety around opening up their bank account during this time of the year. So yeah, that makes sense.
Big facts. I mean, listen, I think, self-awareness and being real with yourself is one of the best things you can do as a person, right? Like, it's understanding who you are, what makes you tick, what matters to you. And I think why we don't like to look at that is because then we have to acknowledge like things that we may have done that were wrong, or things that we did that are out of alignment with who we are and what we say matters to us. And that's a hard thing to face. But like, we as people have to do that as well. So, we talked about fitness earlier, right? Like, if I say I have certain fitness goals and then I go and I eat like half a cake at Thanksgiving, well, like, I'm not in alignment. Or I hit the coquito too hard at Christmas, right? Like, that's not in alignment. And maybe if I can look at that and say, okay, I didn't make the best choice, I'm gonna make a better choice now. Being able to do that is important.
Yeah. So you lay it out there, you see what's in front of you. What would be the next thing after that?
Yeah. So from there, it's like, you have to know what you're shooting for too, right? Like, people often feel off track financially, and it's because, one, they haven't looked at their numbers, right? And they don't actually know what they're shooting for. So how long do you want to work? How much do you need to have in investments, right? Like, how, do you want to work in this career? Do you want to take a step back? A lot of my clients are, attorneys, doctors, like, they work really hard. And so they're like, listen, I got maybe 10 years of this in me. I want to take a step back. But until they know that, and they assign a timeline, they assign dollar amounts to that. Like, I want to buy a home. I'd like to own a home one day. Well, how much is that home? What neighborhood are you living in? How much do you have to put on a down payment, right? Like, what's your monthly payment of your mortgage going to look like, and maintenance costs and those things? Like, until you get really clear, you're always going to feel discouraged, or you're going to feel like, I don't think I can do it, or I'm never going to get there, or I don't know where to start. And it's because you don't have that clarity. I also think that, like, secret sauce, when you have clarity around what you're trying to do, that creates like an emotional connection to that. And I mean like real clarity. So like, know what the house looks like, right? Like, drive in the neighborhood you want to live in and you want to buy that house in. Scroll Zillow and look at the type of Airbnbs you want to rent on that vacation to Paris, right? Like, whatever the thing is for you, do that, because that also like creates that connection to you. And if you bring that up, or like remind yourself of that with whatever frequency it takes for you, that's going to keep you going after it and keep you on track too. Because sometimes we, lose sight and we get distracted as well.
No, that's great advice. And I always say, I've had this mindset since I was young. I always had this mindset where I love to put myself in environments that are a little bit more uncomfortable or outside of my comfort zone, right? So if it's like, yo, like Anna, I like to eat at the nice restaurants. I've never been to a nice restaurant before. Let me go and like put myself in uncomfortable situations, sit in, see how the food tastes, and figure out, how can I make this normal? How can I make this something that we can do all the time? Take that trip and experience, you know, that part of the world and figure out, you know, how can I make this a normal thing, right? More consistent.
I love that. I love it. And Chris, the thing is, like, one of the things that I know about Latinos, a lot of times we play small, right? Like I'm good with like, oh, I can just own a house and like I can pay my bills. It's like there's so much more available to us than that. And there's also this messaging, which I find really funny, about like, oh, that's like white people stuff. Like white people do those kind of things. And it's like, no, that's available to you too. And they take anybody's money, right? So like if you have the money to pay for it, that's available to you. And I think it's so important, once again, seeing and experiencing that either for yourself or seeing other people who look like you, who sound like you, who come from a similar background to you, and seeing them living that life really just opens your eyes as well to like what's possible.
Yeah, what's possible and what you could do. And you know what's crazy? I don't know if you met Linda Garcia. Shout out to Linda Garcia. She's out here in Dallas. But when I had her on, she said, you know, the word wealth belongs to us as well. Not just the white folks. It belongs to us. And we have to understand and know it belongs to us and that we deserve it.
I love that. And that's so true. And I think like what's better than, you know, modeling for our kids. Like one of the things that I'm most proud of in my life is my kids have like almost no concept of money, and like not that they don't, like that's not true, because my 11-year-old will talk to you about mortgages and life insurance. Like she knows what's up, she knows the game, but it's that they're not worried about it, right? So like we could go out to eat and they're not like, oh, is this okay if I order this? Like, is it too much money? How, you know, can we go on that vacation? My 7-year-old was like, oh, I like to go to Paris. I want to go to Paris over this summer. And I was like, we were just in Paris, ma'am. Like, I don't know. Paris is not like around the corner and we go a couple times a year. Like, what do you think this is? But that's so beautiful to me, because that was not something that, first of all, like I would ever have imagined, or something that anybody in my family has even really experienced. And to give that gift to my daughter, like, and my daughters, I fully believe like they deserve all the bougie things and all the nice things, and I want it to be normal for them, because I think that's so important.
And so to me, that's what I call living on the left side of the menu. When you're just looking at the food and you're not looking at the prices, you're living on the left side of the menu, right? And that's, like you said, that's a beautiful thing. That's the goal, to set our family up like that, to where they just looking at the left side. I want to just go to Puerto Rico. I want to go to Japan.
Listen,
you know,
we outside, and we're outside, but in a responsible way. You know what I mean? Like I tell this story, right? Like my mom, I've talked about my mom a lot on this podcast, but like my mom never traveled. Like she would go to Puerto Rico occasionally, yeah, but like travel for leisure, no. And I took, one of mommy's dreams has always been to go to Paris. And I took mommy and my two oldest daughters, which is where my middle one got this habit of like thinking Paris is just something you do. But we went to Paris and I saved for that trip, and I paid for everything. And like flights, hotel, food, shopping, like I paid for all of it, right? And for all four of us. And for me, like I saved for that for a year. And so, yes, I did spend a lot of money and I really enjoyed it. But I also, you know, I had my credit card points and I had my airline miles and I had all that stuff for our upgrades, right? But I had that ready and I planned for it. So yeah, I can live that beautiful life, but it has to be really intentional as well.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so the first one was identify the trauma.
Yep.
Lay out the numbers. Number 2, have a goal, target, steps. I put steps. You need to have steps, multiple steps, clarity. Put yourself in that environment. What is number 4? What is step 4?
It's just to create the investment plan, right? Because the truth is, you know, saving the money is not, and just staying out of debt is not a financial plan, right? Like, you're going to have to take some risk and come up with the plan for how you're going to get to point A, point B. Yes, you could save your way there, but that's going to be a lot harder, and it's probably going to take you a lot longer. You're going to have to get comfortable with investing. So what does that mean in a practical standpoint? Okay, if I know in 10 years, I want to buy a $2 million house, and that means I have to put 20% down. That means I need to have 400 grand to put as a down payment, right? Like, that's like my dream house. That means I have to figure out, what do I need to do between now and 10 years from now to get that $400,000? That means I have to pull up those investment calculators. Like, one of them is a government one. Is it investor.gov? I think it is. Is like a really easy one. You say, hey, how much do I have saved now? Let's say I have $20,000, just for example. It's going to tell me, you know, what's my rate of return? I'm going to invest it at an 8% rate of return, just to keep it really boring and simple. How much do I need to put in on a monthly basis in order to get that $400,000? And I'm going to have to come up with that plan and stick with that plan. So it's going to spit out a number for me. And you can do that for whatever goal you have, right? But you have to have that clarity and that intention and that timeline in order to do that. Then you're going to have to invest your money. So invest in your retirement accounts, right? Invest in your brokerage accounts, invest in your Roth, in, you know, whatever those other things that you may need are, you know, even if it's buying, real estate that's going to spit off, like rental real estate, investment properties that's going to spit off income for you. Like, you just need to know what it is that you're trying to shoot for and calculate how you're going to get there as well.
I love that. Okay. So investment plan, how are you going to get to your goals? What would be the next thing after that?
Yeah. And then the last is really, I mean, the last two, we kind of touched on one of them, but is creating those boundaries, right? So like, listen, a lot of us are guilty of, we have this money, we have this goal that we want to hit. I'm just gonna save and throw all of this money in one pot. So it's my emergency fund, it's my down payment for my car, it's my vacation money, it's just all together. And especially if you have those really clear goals, right? So like in this particular example, you know, I mentioned before my client who had that spending issue with her kids. Like, I had her set up a separate account that was, hey, this is your money for your kids. You could do it for spending, but you can also do it for investing. So I will have like an investment account in this fake example of wanting to buy this house. I'd have an investment account for just that. And so then I can track how close am I to that goal? Because I think also like knowing like that's my dream house right there. And I see it ticking up quarter over quarter, month over month, because I'm making those contributions and the investments are growing and the compound interest is doing its thing. Like, I think that's really important, because if we just, for some things it's fine to just have everything together, like your retirement or whatever. But when you have those really specific goals, and you have to be a lot more intentional about where you're allocating your money and how that's growing over time.
I love that. Okay. And then you said the last one is? The
last one's enjoying your life, right? Like, because the thing is, we're not just like, and that's within reason, right? Like, that's not just we're going all out, but it's about that intentional planning. So dedicating a portion of your income, whatever that is, based on all those goals that you have, right? Whatever that portion of your income is, dedicating that towards intentionally spending it, right? So this is not just willy-nilly. This is, you know, I have some things that I really value and I really want to continue to do, or experiences I really want to have, like whatever that is. And setting up, you know, I'm big on setting up separate accounts. So for me, I have a spending account that, you know, if I want to go eat at a coffee shop, I go have that. If I want to go out for drinks with my friends, I can do that. If I want to go shopping, I can certainly do that. I want to get a facial, like whatever the thing is, I have those. I know what those things are that I really like and what I really value. And I have boundaries around that. So I don't inadvertently spend the money I'm supposed to invest. I don't spend the money for the trip with mommy to Paris next year, right? Like I have those boundaries around that so that it's very clear where I stand around certain things. And that gives you permission to say no. Like, hey, I don't have it right now. I may have money, but it may not be for that right now. And I can say no to it and feel good, because it's also a vote in favor of something very specific that I really want.
And so I want to ask you this. So you mentioned that your kids, they know about life insurance. They're talking the talk. They can have a conversation. They can be on this podcast if they want it.
Big facts.
Let me ask you this. How did you set them up for success? I think you mentioned you have a couple teenagers.
I have 3. So they're 5, 7, and 11.
Okay, so not in high school yet. How are they? How have they been set up for success?
Listen,
and how will you continue to do that?
These kids are rich, first of all. Like, these kids are ostensibly rich. I'm just like, y'all better thank me. You guys better appreciate mommy and dad, because seriously, I put you on, okay? So for me, you know, one of the first things that I did was set up 529s for my kids very early. And I wasn't trying to put tons of money in there, right? Like, at the time when my kids were born, I lived in Maryland. And so Maryland said, hey, you can contribute up to $5,000 per kid per year into a 529 and get a tax deduction on your Maryland state return. And a lot of states do this. It's going to vary, like the amounts vary depending on the state, but Maryland was $5,000 per kid. And so I wasn't able, like when my oldest was born, I wasn't actually able to do the full 5,000, but I was always putting in something, right? Okay. And when I got to the point a couple years later where I could put in that full 5,000, I was doing that on an ongoing basis, right? I also set up brokerage accounts for them, so they're called UTMA accounts, and I probably did this in the last maybe 2 years, and they all have like, I don't know, $7,000, $8,000 in them each, right? And that's over like a couple of years. It's just the small things that they have that are compounding over their lives, right? And so these kids are gonna have their college like fully paid for, which is not something I had. They're gonna have some money to put on a down payment for themselves, or just even to fund a business if they want, whatever they wanna use that money for. Like, they're gonna be able to do that because we decided, hey, $50 here, $100 there. You know, we asked grandparents, hey, instead of buying them gifts, like put $50 in this account for them. All of that adds up over time.
I love that. And so I wanted you to speak to maybe a single mother, a single father out there that has multiple kids. They're trying to figure it out. They have maybe working 2 jobs. Yeah. They want to set up their kids as best as possible. And you gave some great advice. I know you just said, instead of, hey, buying them toys and all that, let's put it in this account. What would you recommend to that person out there that's just trying to figure it out? They barely have time to do research on anything. What would you suggest to them?
So I think, you know, and I'm the kid of that mom, right? So like, I have a lot of understanding of like what that's like and what that struggle is like, having watched my mom like work so hard for so long. To me, I think the biggest gift you can give your kids is you being well. And I think so many moms, parents in particular, like they'll give everything for their kids. And the problem is that oftentimes leaves them weak. So my number one thing that I also tell, so I have a group coaching program where I teach women about like investing and building wealth themselves. The first thing I tell them is like, you can't scrimp and save oftentimes to abundance and to wealth. You have to have your income above a certain amount, and in order to like do a lot of the things that I talk about. And so my first thing is invest in yourself and make sure that you are earning, like increasing your earning potential. That in and of itself is going to be the best investment that you're gonna make. Beyond that, like once you do that, invest for yourself, like get your retirement straight. Because once again, like you don't want to get to be 65 and your kids are worried about how they're going to help you pay your rent. Like you don't want to do that. And if you could do that, just that is such a blessing. Such a blessing.
That. No, that's great advice. And so you mentioned it right now. We can start wrapping this interview up. Talk to us about your coaching program, but specifically what you're doing now. You gave some you gave 6 very valuable steps. Talked about your upbringing. Talk to us about what you're doing now and how you're helping people out if people are interested.
Yeah, so I have two ways that I work with folks. So one, I have my wealth management firm, and that's more for people that are like very high income, couple $100,000 of income more, and they're really looking for someone to help them manage their investments and help them make a lot of tax strategy decisions. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs there as well. But I also recognize, because I care about my community, that's not all of us, that's not most people, and there's a lot of knowledge that I've just gained through this work that I've done over the years that I can impart, even, practical work experience, but then also my own experience of coming from nothing to where I am now. And so, I started a group coaching program. It's called Financial Powerhouse, the Club, and we meet twice a month. We have some pre-recorded modules and like worksheets and things like that the ladies can go through. And I tell them, the goal is for you to lay the foundation to have a multiple six-figure net worth.
Beautiful.
Personally, right? And so, we're talking about life insurance. We're talking about, taking care of your parents and how much you can afford to give your parents, because most of my clients are first-gen Latinas, right? We are talking about like how much to put in your retirement accounts and how to create a budget and all of these things that we're not taught in a way that's like open community. We're just having a conversation, no judgment. It's really one of the favorite things, like one of the best things I do.
I love that. That's amazing. I appreciate, you coming on this platform. And if anybody is interested in what Ana has to offer, I would highly recommend that you reach out to her. I mean, you got a beautiful soul. You're definitely blessing people out there, and God's going to bless you and your family, continue to bless you and your family tremendously. So let the people know where they can find you, where they can reach out to you, and let them know how to correctly pronounce your name, your last name.
Yes. Let's get to it. So I'm mostly, in terms of social media, I'm mostly on Instagram and LinkedIn. So you can just search my name on LinkedIn. On Instagram, it's Ananjai Conte. So ANNANJIEKONTE. That's my Instagram handle. And my website is poderwealth.com.
I love it. And I'll leave everything in the description. I'll link everything in the description of this podcast. Awesome. And once again, we really appreciate you. Before we go, I always ask our guests one last question. Who is one person that needs to be on the Latin Wealth podcast? Ooh. The only rule is you have to know them.
Oh, there's so many. I think one of there's a older Latino guy. He's based in LA. His name is Luis Barajas. He's wonderful, and he's like the OG Latino wealth advisor. Like, he's run his firm for years. He's on the CFP board. Like, he sits on the CFP board. So he's like OG. He would be great. Okay. And he works with a lot of like young Latino entertainers. So I think he also has some good perspective on that. I love it. You
might have to be connected with him.
Yeah, just let me know.
For sure. Look, you guys know where to find us at Latin Wealth across all platforms. It's the Latin Wealth Podcast. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.